Welcome to Infinite Novel. Dive into epic alternate realities. All rights to original creators.
Chapter 36, warm welcome. A few days later, the Wind Rider finally arrived at Alabasta. Cealan, look, it's a desert, such a vast desert. Tashigi rushed to the front of the deck, hugging Cealan's arm as she looked out at the endless golden sand, eyes full of wonder. The desert stretched out as far as the eye could see, a breathtaking natural spectacle. Alabasta, I'm back. Vivi stared at the familiar desert landscape, a bit dazed. Returning to her homeland stirred both excitement and unease within her. Alabasta, can I really save you? Vivi felt a wave of doubt. Even though Cealan was strong and had easily dealt with 4 senior agents of Baroque Works, the enemy ahead was none other than the warlord of the sea, Crocodile, and the vast Baroque Works organization. None of the remaining senior agents were easy opponents. After spending these days together, Vivi had already come to see Cealan and the others as her dearest friends. She did not want them to be put in danger because of her. Vivi glanced at Cealan, her heart conflicted. Was it a mistake to involve Cealan and the others in this fight? Prepare to dock. Vivi, stop standing there and help fold the sails. Nami's voice snapped Vivi back to reality. Oh, coming. Vivi quickly moved to help with the sails, snapping out of her thoughts. Cealan, Vivi seems a little off. Tashigi approached Cealan quietly and whispered. She's probably worried. Crocodile has left too deep a shadow in her heart, but I will handle Crocodile perfectly. Cealan rubbed Tashigi's head gently, speaking with confidence. Yeah. Tashigi's eyes sparkled as she fully believed in his words. Soon, the Wind Rider docked at the shore, and Cealan and his crew stepped onto the desert land of Alabasta. Everyone. Just as they were heading toward the port city, Vivi suddenly stopped and gathered her courage to speak. What's wrong? Cealan looked at Vivi in confusion. Nami and Tashigi were also surprised. Thank you for taking care of me all this time, but I want to cancel the commission. Vivi's eyes were filled with tears, but her tone was determined. Crocodile is too strong. You shouldn't have to face such an enemy. The more she spoke, the firmer her resolve became. What nonsense are you saying? Do you plan to face Baroque Works alone? Nami stepped forward and gave Vivi a light smack on the head, scolding her angrily. Vivi's words reminded Nami of her own past, and she looked at Vivi with both anger and sympathy. Vivi held her forehead, unable to continue. Vivi, we've already considered you a friend. Helping friends in trouble is only natural. Cealan's voice was serious. Cealan, everyone. Vivi looked at Cealan and the 2 girls beside him, deeply moved. And if you cancel the commission, I'll charge you double the breach of contract fee. Cealan smiled devilishly, locking eyes with Vivi. Huh? Vivi gasped, momentarily stunned as she wondered where she would get the money to pay. By the time she snapped out of it, Cealan and the others were already walking away, clearly not planning to accept her cancellation. What? You're always teasing me. Vivi complained, but her heart felt warm. She couldn't stop the smile that crept onto her face. Meeting Cealan and the others was the greatest luck she'd ever had. Vivi, hurry up and catch up. Tashigi waved at her from up ahead. I'm coming. Vivi quickly ran after them, catching up with the group as they moved forward together. Soon, they arrived at the port city of Alabasta, immediately feeling the unique atmosphere of the desert kingdom. The people on the streets were dressed lightly for the heat. Merchants called out from both sides, selling a dazzling array of goods. The place was vibrant and lively. What a wonderful city. Nami and Tashigi were amazed by the port city. Compared to the most prosperous town in the East Blue, Robe Town, this place was on a whole different level. Of course. Alabasta is one of the great civilizations of the Grand Line. Vivi responded proudly when she saw their amazement. But because of Baroque Works, the whole country has fallen into poverty and chaos. This city looks fine because it's near the port. But even this is far worse than before. Vivi's expression turned sad as she spoke. Watching her country fall from peace to turmoil broke her heart. Let's resupply first, then move on to dealing with Crocodile. Cealan gently stroked Vivi's long blue hair, comforting her softly. Yeah. Vivi nodded firmly, and Nami and Tashigi began buying water and food. Cealan, meanwhile, frowned slightly as he glanced at some of the nearby vendors. The special patterns on their clothes and hats were clear symbols of Baroque Works. It seemed they had been marked as soon as they entered the city. Just as Cealan expected, the bustling streets suddenly descended into chaos. Pedestrians scattered, and shops slammed their doors shut one after another. What's going on? Tashigi and Nami looked around, startled by the sudden change. It had been peaceful just moments ago. Why had it turned into panic so suddenly? Ma'am, what happened? Vivi grabbed a middle-aged woman who was running past and asked urgently. The royal army is out robbing and killing again. They're claiming people are rebels. Don't stay here, run. The woman shook off Vivi's hand and fled in terror. No, my father would never give such an order. Vivi's eyes widened as she shouted in disbelief. It's Crocodile. He's moved his plan ahead of schedule. Cealan walked over and spoke calmly. Vivi bit her lip, her heart filled with anxiety. Don't worry. We'll find someone in charge and ask directly. Cealan's observation Haki had already detected someone approaching. Just as he spoke, more than 40 people rushed out from all directions, surrounding Cealan and the others. The leader of the group was none other than the remaining senior agents of Baroque Works. With just a glance, Vivi recognized them. These were the agents she feared the most. Mr. 1, Das Bone, the user of the Dice fruit, the strongest among the senior agents. Mr. 2, Bone Clay, the user of the Clone fruit. Miss Dalblefinger, Zayla, the user of the Spike fruit. Mr. 4, Babe, with his gun that had eaten a Zoan-type devil fruit. Miss Merry Christmas, the user of the Mole fruit. Along with Mr. 11, and several other mid-level agents from Baroque Works. All of them are here. Vivi's pupils trembled. The pressure was suffocating. Except for Crocodile and Robin, nearly all of Baroque Works' high-level forces were now gathered in front of them. So they really think that highly of us. Vivi gave a bitter smile, whispering to herself. This lineup alone, even without Crocodile, could easily destroy most countries. Now, all of them were assembled here for one purpose, to deal with Cealan. It was truly overwhelming. Chapter 37, will you talk? Vivi, Nami, and Tashigi stared at the Baroque Works agents across from them, tense and alert as if facing a deadly threat. You recognize us, huh? Are you scared? Miss Dalblefinger chuckled softly, covering her mouth with her fingers, appearing completely at ease. In her eyes, only Cealan was worth paying attention to. The others were nothing more than background. You're just a bounty hunter from the East Blue, but I suppose it's worth bragging that you made all of us show up together. Mr. 4 laughed loudly, carrying his cannon-like gun with the dog that had eaten a Zoan-type devil fruit. The other agents sneered as well, all confident in their victory. With so many senior agents and mid-level elites gathered, they believed it would be more than enough to deal with Cealan and his group. Struggle all you like. We won't be holding back. Mr. 1 grinned, eager to make Cealan and the others pay for what they had done to their companions. You've arrested so many of us. Today, you'll pay the price. Miss Merry Christmas puffed up arrogantly, her fat face shaking as she spoke. If she had been standing in front of Cealan alone, she wouldn't have dared to act like this. But with so many people here, her confidence swelled. So noisy. Can any of you say something useful? Like, for example, what stage your plan is at? Cealan picked at his ear casually, his tone calm. He had heard the same tough talk from enemies too many times already. It no longer meant anything to him. What really concerned him was their progress with the plan. Still acting nonchalant at a time like this? Mr. 1 sneered, thinking this was exactly the kind of delusion that would make someone dare to challenge Crocodile. But now that he saw Cealan in person, he thought he was just a young man with a bit of momentum but no understanding of his true situation. Mr. 1, quit wasting time talking to this brat. Let's finish them off and report back. Miss Dalblefinger could no longer hold back her impatience. The Utopia plan had reached its final stage, and they still hoped to make it back in time to assist. Seeing that the group before them had no intention of surrendering, Cealan also lost interest in entertaining their arrogance. If you won't talk while standing, then I'll have you talk lying down. Cealan let out a sigh, his tone turning cold. Boom! An invisible and overwhelming pressure surged from Cealan's body. The next moment, countless streaks of purple-black lightning crackled through the air, enveloping the entire city as Cealan released his Conqueror's Haki. Although Cealan had deliberately focused his Conqueror's Haki on the Baroque Works agents, the sheer intensity still swept through the entire area. Ordinary citizens caught in the aftermath fainted as if crushed beneath a natural disaster. The previously chaotic streets fell silent, the fleeing people collapsing as if falling into a deep sleep. Complete silence blanketed the entire city. As for the Baroque Works agents directly hit by Cealan's Haki, they could hardly bear it. The terrifying wave of Conqueror's Haki made the mid-level agents feel like they had plunged straight into hell. They collapsed to the ground foaming at the mouth, unconscious. Only the 5 senior agents remained conscious, lying flat on the ground and gasping for breath, barely able to resist fainting. How could the legendary Conqueror's Haki appear here? Mr. 1 was completely shaken, unable to hide the panic in his voice. It was too powerful. The pressure was like mountains collapsing, the seas surging, the sky shattering. They could not resist. All they could do was kneel, crushed beneath this overwhelming presence. Mr. 1 gritted his teeth and tried to stand, but even as his bones creaked under the strain, he could not rise beneath the crushing weight of the Haki. The other senior agents lay limp on the ground, stunned and spiritless like dead fish, unable to even muster the will to resist. It all felt absurd. This kind of monster, rare even in the New World, was standing right in front of them. Ignoring Mr. 1, Cealan first turned back to check on Nami and the others. Even though he had tried to avoid them, Nami, Vivi, and Tashigi still felt the effects of the Haki. Beads of sweat rolled down their foreheads. Cealan adjusted the range of his Haki several times, finally concentrating it entirely on the Baroque Works agents. Sorry. Still a bit unskilled with it. Cealan gave an apologetic smile to Nami and the others. His Conqueror's Haki had only awakened a few days ago and was still hard to control precisely. We're fine. Nami responded excitedly, covering her chest where her heart was still racing. Seeing that they were unharmed, Cealan was relieved. Turning back toward the Baroque Works agents, Cealan walked up to their leader. So, will you tell me about your plan now? Cealan stared down at Mr. 1, asking casually. Dream on. Despite the fear in his heart, Mr. 1 bit back his pain and answered defiantly. What about the rest of you? Are you all going to be this stubborn too? Cealan glanced at the other senior agents, but they remained silent, avoiding eye contact. I admire your backbone, but I don't agree with it. Cealan chuckled coldly, then turned his gaze back to Mr. One. You were the loudest one just now, weren't you? Huh? Mr. One's eyes widened in alarm, unsure of what Cealan was planning. Without another word, Cealan raised his left foot and stomped hard on Mr. One's right wrist, grinding it into the ground. Ah! Mr. One screamed, his fingers twisting unnaturally as the bones beneath were crushed mercilessly under Cealan's boot. In a desperate move, Mr. One activated the powers of the dice fruit, turning his hand into steel, blades growing from his fingers. But Cealan merely sneered, coating his foot with armament haki before continuing to crush the blade hand beneath his heel. The steel-like fingers snapped under the pressure, blood pooling on the ground. Ah! Mr. One howled in agony, his cries piercing the air. Nearby, the mid-level agents, just beginning to regain consciousness from the shock of the Conqueror's haki, opened their eyes only to see this brutal scene. They stared at Cealan in terror. He was powerful and cruel. Absolutely terrifying. So, who's going to tell me now? What is the plan, and how far along is it? Cealan's eyes swept coldly over the remaining Baroque Works agents. I'll talk. One of the mid-level agents finally broke, trembling as he hurriedly began to spill everything. It wasn't long before they laid out the full plan, using dance powder to cause a 3-year drought, turning the people against the royal family, plotting to assassinate Cobra, and seizing control of the country under the guise of being a hero. And now, they were already in the final stages of the plan. What? He's the one behind all of this. Vivi's eyes turned red, fury and sorrow surging in her chest. She had thought Crocodile was simply stoking the conflict between the people and the kingdom, but she never imagined he was behind all the suffering her country had endured. Even her father's life was now at risk. Don't worry. There's still time. We'll stop him. Standing behind her, Cealan reached out and gently comforted Vivi. Chapter 38. Head there at top speed. Cealan, what should we do? Vivi's eyes were filled with confusion. The constant stream of bad news left her at a complete loss. Her father Cobra's safety, the growing misunderstanding between the people and the royal army, and the manipulated rebellion. Every piece of news struck her like a heavy hammer, shaking her heart. We head to the capital as soon as possible. Since Crocodile has moved his plan ahead, that will be the final battlefield. Cealan thought for a moment and gave his answer. According to what they learned from the mid-level agents, Crocodile was already furious and planned to take the country by force. Even Mr. Two Bone Clay had been sent out, which meant Crocodile had abandoned his idea of impersonating Cobra. From this point on, Crocodile's actions would only grow more violent and crazed. Yes, as long as Crocodile is stopped, everything can be saved. Vivi's gaze became firm once again. She had resolved to stop Crocodile, determined not to let her country fall into his hands. Even if it meant sacrificing her life, she would not hesitate. Soon, they woke the newspaper publisher who had been knocked out by the wave of Conqueror's haki. They handed over all the information on Baroque Works, asking the newspaper to expose Crocodile's conspiracy to the public. After that, they went to the marine station in the city, turning over the captured Baroque Works members and exchanging them for a bounty of 130 million berries. With simple medical treatment completed, the group immediately set off toward the capital of Alabasta, Alyaburna. At the marine branch, Captain Deca watched as Cealan and his group left, his expression grave. That Conqueror's haki just now, it must have been from him. It's unbelievable. Captain Deca spoke in disbelief. Until now, he had only ever heard of Conqueror's haki. It was said that those who possessed the qualities of a king were always among the top powerhouses on the seas. For a bounty hunter from the East Blue to awaken such a talent, Captain Deca was deeply puzzled. In his understanding, this type of gift was rare even in the New World. For it to appear here at the entrance to the Grand Line was simply unimaginable. At that moment, a group of soldiers brought over the senior Baroque Works agents, their hands bound tightly with sea-stone handcuffs. Sir, is it really true about Crocodile's conspiracy? The soldiers still found it hard to believe. The scale of the crime seemed too shocking to accept. Crocodile was officially recognized as a warlord of the sea and had always portrayed himself as Alabasta's hero. Even though they now knew Baroque Works belonged to him, they had assumed it was just to boost his reputation. No one had imagined Crocodile was the one behind the drought, or that he planned to overthrow the kingdom. Didn't those Baroque Works agents explain everything clearly? The evidence is solid, their plan has clear logic, and the facts line up. Captain Deca's face darkened. If not for such undeniable proof, even he would not have believed it. A warlord of the sea, a system established by the world government, plotting to usurp a member nation? It was unthinkable. Thankfully, Cealan and his group uncovered the plot. Captain Deca felt a wave of gratitude. If Cealan hadn't acted, they would have remained blind to the truth. Had Crocodile's plan continued unnoticed, the royal family would have been wiped out, countless civilians would have died, and the Marines would have borne part of the blame for their failure to prevent it. But, can Cealan really defeat Crocodile on his own? Deca frowned, looking toward the direction of the capital, worry etched across his face. He knew Cealan possessed Conqueror's haki and had crushed a group of senior agents with ease, as if swatting flies. But the enemy he was about to face was nothing like those agents. It was Crocodile of the 7 warlords of the sea, wielder of the Sansan fruit. A Logia-type devil fruit, just like the admirals. Immune to physical attacks, capable of reshaping the battlefield at will. Just imagining it left Captain Deca feeling hopeless. Aside from the admirals, he could not think of anyone who might stand a chance. Deka took a deep breath, suppressing his concern. His next priority was to spread the truth and request support from Marine headquarters. Notify all nearby Marine branches. Prepare to stabilize the situation with the civilians. Deka was already imagining the chaos that would erupt once the people learned the truth. He quickly picked up the Den Mushi to contact headquarters and report the incident. Marine headquarters, Fleet Admiral's office. The moment the report came in, the high-ranking officers at headquarters gathered for an emergency meeting. How dare he! Fleet Admiral Sengoku slammed the table in fury, his usual calm demeanor gone. A warlord of the sea, a pirate officially sanctioned by the world government, attempting to overthrow a member nation? The implications of this were far too severe. Would the other 170-plus member nations simply sit back and accept it? They would certainly question the authority of the world government, stirring up unrest across the entire world. I've said it before, the 7 warlord system is a mistake. We should have abolished it long ago. Akaina spoke up, his expression grim and voice harsh. Even Aokiji, usually quick to challenge Akaina's aggressive views, stayed silent this time. The matter was simply too serious. Ahem. Enough. The priority right now is to discuss how to handle the situation. Vice Admiral Tsuru interrupted, cutting off the argument. Whether the 7 warlord system should remain was a decision for the world government, not the Marines. The most urgent task is to send support to Alabasta immediately and take down Crocodile. Sengoku's expression was stern as he gave the order. Borsalino, head there at top speed and make sure this matter is resolved quickly. Sengoku turned his gaze to Kizuru. Kizuru yawned, raising his heavy eyelids as he stood reluctantly. Isn't that Cealan guy already there? He should be able to handle Crocodile. Kizuru's tone was as lazy as ever. He clearly did not want to go. What nonsense! How could he possibly stand up to Crocodile? Just go already. Sengoku's face darkened as he scolded Kizuru. Of course, Sengoku knew about Cealan. He had personally approved his bounty hunter license and recognized his potential. But defeating Crocodile? It was far too soon for that. Maybe in a few years, once Cealan had fully mastered Haki. But not now. Crocodile really is terrifying, isn't he? Kizuru sighed dramatically, then left the meeting room, turning into a flash of light as he headed toward Alabasta. Watching him go, Sengoku let out a long breath. Despite his laziness, Kizuru was reliable when it came to completing missions. Alright, let's continue discussing the situation. Sengoku brought the focus back to the meeting. This matter was too serious. Capturing Crocodile alone would not be enough to resolve it. Chapter 39, final stage. Later that evening, citizens of the city, who had been stunned by the wave of Conqueror's Haki, began to wake up one by one. What happened? Why did we suddenly faint? Many people stood up, confused and disoriented. Their memories remained stuck on the earlier chaos, when they had been chased by Baroque Works agents disguised as the Royal Army. The despicable and shameless Crocodile. The evil Baroque Works. They slandered King Cobra. Breaking news. One newspaper for one berry. The newspapers on the streets not only exposed Crocodile's conspiracy but also included a brief introduction to Cealan, explaining how he had uncovered the truth. The newspaper workers shouted loudly, explaining the situation to countless confused citizens. Crocodile is the hero of Alabasta. How dare you slander him? One citizen shouted angrily, clearly a loyal supporter of Crocodile. Heh, see for yourself. The newspaper worker sneered and slapped a paper into the man's hands. What? The 3-year drought was caused by Crocodile. He ordered Baroque Works to provoke a civil war in the kingdom. The citizens who had just been brimming with righteous anger were left stunned. The crimes listed in the newspaper, which they had always blamed on King Cobra, were now clearly revealed to be the work of Crocodile. At first, many still doubted the report. They wondered if this could simply be a lie from the royal family to shift blame. But when the Marines arrived, working alongside the newspapers to spread the truth and publicly displayed the captured Baroque Works agents, their doubts began to vanish. The truth could no longer be denied. Crocodile was the true mastermind. How could this be? How could this happen? The eyes of countless citizens went blank with shock, then quickly burned with rage and hatred. Because of Crocodile's selfish ambition, their country had suffered through a 3-year drought without a single drop of rain. Their lives had become unbearable, their families torn apart, friends and loved ones lost to famine. They had been kept in the dark, worshipping the very man who had caused their suffering and turning their anger toward the innocent king. Now that the truth had come to light, the people's hatred for Crocodile was fierce, and their guilt toward the royal family ran deep. Thank you, Cealan, for revealing the truth to us. Countless citizens expressed their gratitude. Before this, they had never even heard Cealan's name. But now, in their hearts, Cealan had become a hero. Cealan went to the capital to confront Crocodile. Can he really win? The people could not hide their worry. Even though their hatred for Crocodile ran deep, they could not imagine defeating him themselves. Crocodile's image as the desert's invincible hero had been deeply ingrained. He had crushed other pirates with ease, summoned sandstorms before their eyes, and turned into sand at will. In the eyes of the people, Crocodile was like a god of the desert, untouchable and unbeatable. Many citizens were filled with doubt and fear for Cealan's safety. Alabasta's capital, Alyabrna. In a hidden base belonging to Baroque Works. Boss, several of the senior agents have been captured, and our entire plan has been exposed. The panic report came through the Den Mushi. Crocodile remained silent, listening to the bad news. "Boss, I'm hanging up. The Marines are searching nearby." There was a brief flurry of chaotic sounds before the Den Mushi went silent. Staring at the silent snail, Crocodile's face turned ashen. His clenched fists creaked with tension. The image of his confident agents taking on their assignments flashed through his mind, their boasting still echoing in his ears. What were they saying just a few days ago? All so full of confidence, bragging about how easily they would deal with that bounty hunter. But as soon as Cealan showed up, they were all captured. Not even a day. Not even one day. Crocodile's voice trembled with rage, his entire body shaking. If they had just held out for 2 more days, the plan would have been complete. Could a bounty hunter from the East Blue, a newcomer to the Grand Line, really be this terrifying? Just days ago, Baroque Works had been thriving. His plan to seize the country was progressing smoothly. Everything had been perfectly in place. Victory was within his grasp. How had it all crumbled so quickly? Years of careful planning, years of building power, destroyed in the blink of an eye. His dream of seizing Alabasta in glory had completely collapsed. His position as one of the 7 warlords of the sea was as good as lost. Years of hard work, now on the verge of ruin. Crocodile's hatred toward Cealan burned so intensely that he wanted to tear him apart to relieve his fury. "Boss, should we call off the plan?" Nico Robin, standing nearby, looked at Crocodile calmly and asked. She was not as angry at Cealan as Crocodile was. In fact, part of her felt a sense of relief. She was secretly thankful that the Utopia plan had failed. Robin had no desire to bring so much suffering upon a country. The only regret she held was not being able to read the poneglyph. "What nonsense are you spouting? I haven't failed yet." Crocodile's bloodshot eyes stared at Robin as he roared in anger. "The news hasn't reached the capital yet. Use everything we have to incite the rebellion immediately. I'm going to storm the palace. I want to see the poneglyph with my own eyes. As long as I get Pluton, I'll rise again. I will become the new emperor of this sea." Crocodile was completely unhinged now, clinging to the hope that the ancient weapon Pluton could still turn his fate around. "Nico Robin, devil child, you'll cooperate, won't you?" Crocodile narrowed his eyes, glaring at Robin. His tone was dark and threatening. "Of course. I also want to see the poneglyph." Robin replied calmly, her lips curling into a slight smile, but she had only promised to see the poneglyph, not to share its contents. If the poneglyph did indeed hold the location of Pluton, she would rather take that secret to the grave. "Ha ha ha, good, that's more like it." Crocodile laughed wildly, his ambition reignited by the thought of Pluton. As long as he obtained the ancient weapon, he believed he could recover everything he had lost, twice over. "Cealan, I hope you come to me before I leave Alabasta. I'll make sure to give you a proper welcome." Crocodile's expression turned sinister. He knew that the Marines would surely dispatch an admiral after the plan was exposed. He would have to escape Alabasta soon. But before leaving, he could not accept the humiliation of letting Cealan walk away unharmed. If Cealan thought he could step on him to climb to the top, then he should be prepared to die for it. Chapter 40 Confrontation. The next morning, in front of the palace, a large number of rebels had gathered outside the palace gates, while the royal army inside remained on high alert, ready for battle at any moment. King Cobra stood atop the palace wall, shouting down to the rebel leader, Koza, from afar. "Koza, is this really necessary? Once the fighting begins, how many innocent lives will be lost?" Cobra's voice was filled with emotion. He regarded the people as his own family and could not bear to see them slaughtering one another. "Your Majesty, things have gone too far. This is no longer something I can stop." Koza did not show the spirit of a rebel leader. Instead, his expression was heavy and grim. Just yesterday, he had been hopeful. With Crocodile's conspiracy exposed, he had intended to negotiate with the royal army. But overnight, the middle-level rebels had gone mad, stirring up anger throughout the ranks. No matter what he said, they still placed all the blame on Cobra and were determined to storm the palace. Now, Koza found himself carried by the will of the rebellion, unable to make decisions on his own. "Chief, why waste words with him? Kill the tyrant." A middle-ranking rebel shouted passionately. On his hat was the symbol of Baroque Works. "Kill the tyrant! Kill the tyrant!" The rebel army suddenly roared, their killing intent boiling over. "Your Majesty, give the order to counterattack." Chaka turned to Cobra urgently. It had come to this. They could no longer afford to show mercy. "No, I will not harm them. Alabasta belongs to all its people." Cobra closed his eyes in pain. He could not bring himself to attack his own citizens. If his death could put an end to this war, he would gladly give his life. "Ha ha, what a noble monarch." Crocodile's mocking voice rang out as he suddenly appeared behind Cobra, with Nico Robin at his side. He showed nothing but disdain for Cobra's soft-heartedness, but he was happy to take advantage of it. Seeing Crocodile appear, Chaka transformed into his jackal form and Pel into his falcon form, both instantly on guard. "King Cobra, take me to see the poneglyph." Crocodile ignored Chaka and Pel entirely, speaking directly to Cobra. "Kill me if you want, but you will never get what is written there." Cobra refused without hesitation. The secrets his family had guarded for generations, especially something so dangerous, could not be allowed to fall into the hands of a man like Crocodile. "You do not care about your own life, but what about the people outside?" Crocodile smiled cruelly. He picked up a Den Mushi and gave a simple command. Outside, the rebels immediately grew more excited and aggressive. The rebel forces surged toward the palace, forcing the royal army to prepare for battle. Seeing the inevitable clash, Cobra closed his eyes, his expression filled with anguish. On one side was the secret his family had sworn to protect. On the other, the lives of thousands of his people. The choice tormented him. Fine, I will take you there. Cobra finally spoke, his voice heavy with despair. The decision seemed to drain all the strength from his body, and in that moment, he appeared much older. Your Majesty! Chaka and Pel both shouted, trying to stop him. There is no need to say anything more. I have made my decision. Cobra shook his head, cutting them off. This was his choice to make. Very good. Let's go. Crocodile grinned, pleased. Cobra gave one last look toward the battlefield below, then turned and led Crocodile and Robin toward the burial chamber beneath the palace where the poneglyph was hidden. The moment they left, several rebels smiled coldly and stirred up the crowd even further. In the next instant, the rebel army launched their assault on the royal army. The battle had begun. Chaka and Pel wanted to chase after Cobra but were quickly trapped in the chaos of the fighting and could not break away. When Cealan and his group arrived at the palace, the two sides were already locked in combat. Blood stained the sand, and soldiers clashed everywhere. How could this happen? They've already started fighting. No, I have to stop them. Vivi's face turned pale as she watched the brutal scene unfold before her. She stepped forward anxiously, wanting to intervene. It's useless. They are already consumed by the fight. Who would you persuade now? To handle this, you need to be direct. Cealan reached out to stop Vivi, speaking calmly. Vivi looked at him, startled, not understanding what he meant. The next moment, an overwhelming wave of Conqueror's haki burst forth from Cealan, sweeping across the entire battlefield. Boom! Every soldier on both sides felt as though they had been struck in the head by a hammer. Their bodies trembled, cold sweat dripping down their backs as if they were prey caught in the gaze of a hungry beast. Weapons clattered to the ground as soldiers froze in place, stunned. All eyes turned to Cealan. After using his Conqueror's haki the day before, Cealan's control had already improved significantly. Now he could direct the pressure exactly where he wanted. Cealan nodded in satisfaction, then, under the watchful gaze of both armies, walked forward with Vivi to the center of the battlefield. It's Cealan, and Princess Vivi. Everyone, stop. Koza, who had been struggling to regain control of the rebels, immediately shouted out. Cealan's display of power reignited his hope. With the force of Cealan's haki and their leader's order, the rebel army quickly calmed down. It's Princess Vivi, and Bounty Hunter Cealan. Stand down. Chaka and Pel, equally surprised and relieved, called out to the king's army. When the soldiers saw Vivi, they knelt down immediately, showing their loyalty to the royal family. Explain everything to them. Cealan leaned down and whispered to Vivi. Vivi nodded firmly, stepping forward to face the armies and clearly explaining Crocodile's plot. The king has been wrongfully accused. The soldiers of the royal army erupted in cheers. What? How could this be? The rebels were stunned. The truth shattered their beliefs in an instant. Though some resisted the truth at first, when Koza stood by Vivi's side and confirmed her words, the rebels had no choice but to accept it. Between Cealan's overwhelming presence and Vivi's heartfelt explanation, the last flames of rebellion were extinguished. To protect the people, King Cobra has been forced by Crocodile to take him to the royal family's hidden chamber. Chaka and Pel approached Vivi and Cealan, their faces grave as they reported the situation. What? Father? Vivi's eyes welled up with tears. She was overwhelmed with worry. Lead the way. We're going to find Crocodile. Your father is safe for now, but that may not last. Cealan picked up Vivi, his voice calm but serious. There was no time to waste. They needed to move quickly. Yes. Vivi nodded firmly, pointing out the direction. Holding Vivi securely, Cealan sprinted toward the chamber beneath the palace. He left Nami and Tashigi behind at the palace to hold the line. Every subscriber brings us closer to more epic novels. Join Infinite Novel today. Chapter 41, Strange Laugh in Front of the Poneglyph. Everything recorded here is the history of Alabasta. There is no mention of Pluton. Robin looked straight at Crocodile and spoke calmly. Say that again. Crocodile glared at her, his expression dark. He couldn't understand the poneglyph. But he knew that the carving on the poneglyph dated back to before Alabasta, so how could it record the kingdom's history? Was she treating him like a fool? If Robin weren't the only one who could decipher the poneglyph, he would have drawn his sword and killed her on the spot. I said there is no information about Pluton. Robin remained composed and repeated herself right in his face. Of course, she was lying. It clearly stated that Pluton was hidden in Wano country. But she didn't want such a deadly weapon falling into the hands of someone as cruel as Crocodile, so she lied. Looking at Crocodile's furious expression, Robin felt a flicker of satisfaction. The 5-year plan to seize the kingdom, the Baroque works that he painstakingly built it had all been destroyed by Cealan. He had finally gotten close to clues about Pluton, and even the translator who had worked with him for years dared to betray him. Crocodile clenched his fists, on the verge of snapping. Off to the side, Cobra was stunned. He had thought Crocodile was about to succeed, but it turned out someone even stronger had been hiding in the shadows. Cobra looked at Robin curiously. This woman also had a story. If this only concerns Alabasta's history, then you're useless to me. Crocodile stared coldly at Robin, his face grim. Unfortunately for him, Robin didn't look afraid at all. She stayed calm throughout. Even if she knew where Pluton was, she would never tell him. To him now, Robin really was useless. Crocodile clenched his fists and was about to end Robin's life. Watching Crocodile's movements, Robin closed her eyes, filled with regret. It was unfortunate she still hadn't found the poneglyph that recorded the Void Century, and she couldn't fulfill O'Hara's final wish. It was unfortunate she couldn't live on for Saul and her mother. Dear she. At the end of her life, Robin chose to recall Saul's laughter. Seeing Robin's strange smile, Crocodile was so angry. Even facing death, she still wanted to mock him? Crocodile struck out, aiming to kill Robin with one blow. Just as his fist was about to hit her, a giant sword flew over. Boom! The enormous sword carried massive force, instantly knocking Crocodile away and slamming him into the wall. Looks like I got here just in time. Cealan walked into the funeral hall with Vivi in his arms. It's Vivi and warrior Cealan. Cobra's eyes lit up and he immediately brightened. Dad, I'm so glad you're still alive. Vivi rushed to Cobra, beaming with joy. Robin stared at Cealan in a daze, feeling somewhat grateful. Sure enough, even if she had prepared herself to die, surviving still felt better. What, you're rushing to die too? Crocodile got up from the wall with a twisted grin. Cealan had ruined his plans time and time again, completely shattering everything he'd worked for. Now, he even dared to interfere when Crocodile was about to deal with a traitor. He couldn't tolerate it anymore. Not really. I just saw how lonely you looked and thought I'd help you reunite with your subordinates. Cealan spoke with a straight face, as if he truly meant it. Crocodile's face twitched, and the grin on his face quickly turned gloomy. The next moment, he could no longer suppress his fury and let out a furious roar. What a joke. Do you even know who you're facing? I'm Crocodile, one of the 7 warlords of the sea. Crocodile bent his right hand into a claw and slashed toward Cealan with force. But Cealan didn't dodge or move. He let the attack land directly. Seeing Cealan act so arrogantly, Crocodile grinned viciously. He had already imagined the sight of Cealan's stomach being ripped open. Swish! Crocodile's claws tore through Cealan's clothes, leaving several bloody gashes on his body. How is this possible? Crocodile stared at Cealan in disbelief. That attack had been full of rage and was one of his strongest moves. Back when he pretended to be a hero in Alabasta, this single claw had been enough to kill pirates. But now, it only left superficial wounds on Cealan's body. Was his physical strength just that overwhelming? You're strong, I'll give you that. Cealan felt the sting of the wound and smiled. That kind of power really deserved to be taken seriously. But then Cealan glanced around the unstable funeral hall and decided to take the battle elsewhere. If the place collapsed during the fight, he'd be fine, but Vivi and the others would be in real danger. I'd rather not be buried underground. Let's fight somewhere more open. Armament Haki, coat. Cealan's right hand turned black as he backhanded and grabbed Crocodile's right arm. Haki. Crocodile's pupils shrank, immediately sensing something was wrong. Swish! While Crocodile was still shocked, Cealan dragged him out of the burial hall and into the desert outside the palace. Before leaving, Cealan didn't forget to pick up his giant sword. You actually know how to use Haki. Crocodile snapped out of it, broke free from Cealan's grip with ease, and stared at him in disbelief. Back in the New World, Haki users were everywhere. If you didn't know at least 1 or 2 types of Haki, you weren't even qualified to call yourself a pirate. But in the first half of the Grand Line, especially near the starting point, Haki was a rarity. Yet Cealan had completely upended his expectations. Not only did he know Haki, but his control was also incredibly refined. What? You don't? Cealan looked at Crocodile, the corners of his mouth lifting. You? Crocodile's expression turned ugly. Of course he knew about Haki, but he hadn't trained it much and was still at the beginner level. After failing to challenge Whitebeard, he retreated to the first half of the Grand Line. There were no enemies here that required Haki to defeat. With just the powers of the Sansan fruit, he could dominate. So without any real training, his Haki had never developed. Now, compared to Cealan's Haki, his own seemed worthless. To be upstaged by a rookie in the Grand Line infuriated Crocodile. It was true, Crocodile hadn't expected someone new to the Grand Line to be capable of using Haki. But he wasn't afraid. Back in the New World, he had defeated plenty of powerful opponents who could use Haki. Chapter 42. Noble Phantasm. Crocodile's face twisted in fury, his sinister gaze locked onto Cealan. His entire body was trembling with anger. Extreme anger. The power he had built up over many years was destroyed by the bastard in front of him, leaving him completely isolated. The Pluton he had planned for so long, the title of Shishibukai he had painstakingly earned, all were buried at Cealan's hands. A rookie who had just entered the Grand Line had crushed everything he had and even looked down on him. The fury and humiliation in Crocodile's heart erupted like a volcano. Go to hell! Crocodile roared, pressing his right hand firmly to the ground. Erosion cycle. The full power of the Sansan fruit was unleashed. In the next moment, the water veins deep beneath the desert, along with the moisture in the air, were all sucked dry by Crocodile's right hand. The desert, already barren, was now completely lifeless. Boom! Deadly sandstorms surged into the sky. The sand blotted out the sun, turning the battlefield into a desolate wasteland covered in a dim, deathly yellow hue. The ground cracked apart. Stones, plants, animals, all living things, were eroded by the sandstorm and soon disintegrated into sand. Now what? Crocodile's voice came from within the storm, full of pride. He had obviously turned into sand and merged with the storm. He wanted to see fear in Cealan's eyes, but unfortunately, he did not. It's fine. It's just like taking a shower. In the violent, raging sandstorm, Cealan spoke calmly. With armament haki coating his entire body, the sand could not erode him for now. Still putting up a front. How long can your haki last? Crocodile was not discouraged, remaining full of confidence. If mere haki could resist his strongest move, he would not have become one of the 7 warlords of the sea. Under the cycle of erosion, many powerful haki users had been exhausted to death in the sands. In Crocodile's eyes, the power of his devil fruit was not necessarily weaker than those with overwhelming haki. It can probably last 10 days. Cealan said calmly. His endurance was ranked at B+, the same level as his strength. This level of consumption was nothing to him. Stop boasting and just wait quietly for death. Crocodile laughed disdainfully. He simply thought Cealan was bluffing. In the New World, pirates with bounties of hundreds of millions could barely last 10 minutes under his erosion cycle. There was no way Cealan could last 10 days. Although I'd love to open your eyes, I have no interest in wasting time with you. Cealan didn't want to drag this out. It was too boring to prolong the fight. The only trouble was that his current observation haki wasn't sharp enough to accurately locate Crocodile within the storm. But if he couldn't pinpoint him, then he would simply cover the entire area with an attack. Next, you'll die under my strongest move. Get ready, Crocodile. Cealan smiled brightly, raising the giant sword in his hand. I may already be a corpse, but my sins are eternal. And so, I shall consign my body and soul to the seat of oblivion that drifts in Hades. My great foe and pitiful fellow, dance along with my mad rush. Noble phantasm, 9 lives shooting the 100 heads. Massive power and magical energy surged through his body, gathering into the giant sword and dispersing the surrounding sand. In mythology, Heracles slew the Hydra's 9 heads simultaneously with a bow and arrow. 9 lives shooting the 100 heads was an extension of that. This noble phantasm was not limited to a specific weapon. It could be used with bows, swords, spears, axes, or shields. Once unleashed, 9 simultaneous strongest attacks would burst forth, powerful enough to alter the terrain. What? Crocodile sensed the immense surge of energy from Cealan and was visibly shaken. Even though he had elementalized into sand, a chilling fear crept into him. The next moment, with a world-shattering momentum, a gigantic slash erupted from Cealan's sword, cloaked in a thin layer of armament haki. The slash split into 9, attacking indiscriminately. In the sky, beneath the ground, and throughout the surrounding area. Within a 1-kilometer radius, everything visible was enveloped by the attack. The yellow sand that once covered the sun dissipated in an instant under the overwhelming slashes. Subconsciously, Crocodile's sand form instinctively retreated. He tried to flee, trying to keep his distance and escape the strike. Haha, futile. Sensing Crocodile's position, Cealan sneered. This was a technique designed to slay a Hydra. It covered an entire city. How could it be so easily avoided? In Crocodile's horrified eyes, a slash struck him. How is this possible? Crocodile exclaimed loudly. Even though he was over 1,000 meters away from Cealan, he still couldn't escape. The attack hadn't lost any power. The irresistible strength left him no hope of victory. The elementalized Crocodile couldn't defend against a slash imbued with armament haki. The next moment, his elemental form was forcibly restored to human form. Crocodile's body was covered in wounds. His internal organs and bones were severely damaged, and he lay on the ground coughing up blood. The power of 9 lives shooting the 100 heads gradually faded. But the battlefield had undergone a complete transformation. The once flat desert had become a giant basin, and the loose sand, compressed under immense force, had melted into crystal-like glass upon cooling. The crystal basin sparkled under the sun, silently telling the world how fierce the battle had been. Cealan walked over and silently looked down at Crocodile. At this moment, Crocodile was gravely injured, his breath weak, with none of his former grandeur. Crocodile stared at Cealan in shock. If it weren't for his strong physique and partial immunity through elemental transformation, he would already be dead. He had never seen such destructive power, such terrifying swordsmanship. Even back when he had challenged Whitebeard years ago, facing the power of the tremor fruit, Crocodile hadn't felt such horror. No chance to dodge, no chance to resist. It was truly the strongest blow. The forces he had built over years were shattered. His years of planning were turned to dust. His final hopes all crumbled before Cealan. A wave of desolation and frustration washed over him, finally draining him of all fight. Ha 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 ha. It was all futile, huh? Crocodile laughed bitterly, using all his strength to speak. Just entering the Grand Line, and already possessing such terrifying power. Was the sea about to welcome a new emperor? Crocodile thought of Whitebeard, whom he had once challenged. Now, the title of the world's strongest might soon have a new contender. Cealan, don't get defeated by anyone else before I challenge you again next time. Crocodile looked at Cealan and said firmly. He was Crocodile, and he would definitely make a comeback. Oh, sure. After you get out of Impel Down. Cealan replied calmly, not taking Crocodile's words seriously. In front of him, a temporary defeat meant a permanent defeat. Chapter 43, Over everyone in the palace saw the massive commotion and rushed over. Cobra, Vivi, Nami, Tashigi, Robin, along with the rebels and the royal army, all arrived. What happened here? The desert turned into a basin, and even the sand was compressed into crystal. Everyone stared in shock at the glowing crystal basin before them. The battle between Crocodile and Cealan had been terrifying. The environment within a radius of 1 kilometer had been completely transformed by their clash. The generals of both the rebel and the royal armies were astounded. They were just ordinary people with slightly more strength, and couldn't begin to comprehend how much power it would take to cause such catastrophic changes to the land. Compared to this kind of battlefield, their swords and muskets were nothing more than toys. This level of destruction could wipe out 100,000 troops with ease. Everyone continued forward. Before knowing the final result, they were all anxious. If Cealan had lost, they would all face extermination. But when they saw Crocodile lying on the ground and Cealan standing with nothing more than slightly dirted clothes, cheers erupted. The demon Crocodile is finally finished. Everyone looked at the gravely injured Crocodile and shouted excitedly. This Crocodile, who had terrorized Alabasta for years and whose strength was once considered unmatched, had been defeated. The invincible Desert Emperor was taken down by Cealan. And Cealan wasn't even injured, just had some dust on his clothes. Was Crocodile all hype? It was understandable for them to doubt it, but the crystal basin beneath their feet silenced those thoughts. This battlefield, like something out of the apocalypse, made it clear that the power on display was on a natural disaster level. So, it wasn't that Crocodile was weak, it was that Cealan was too strong. Strong enough to completely overwhelm him. The soldiers of both the rebel and royal armies stared at Cealan with a mix of awe and admiration. In their eyes, Cealan's heroic figure was as majestic as a god. God of war, Cealan, savior, Cealan. Countless soldiers shouted Cealan's name, their eyes filled with fervor. The voices grew louder and louder, echoing into the sky. Amid the crowd, Robin stood in stunned silence, murmuring to herself, "Unbelievable." Crocodile, one of the 7 warlords of the sea, was defeated by him. Having been forced to cooperate with Crocodile for years, she knew better than anyone how terrifying he was. As the user of the sand fruit, Crocodile had refined his abilities to perfection. Sandstorm, Desert Prison, Desert Spata, Erosion Cycle. Every move Robin knew was fearsome in its own right. Even a pirate with a bounty of tens of millions was nothing more than a chicken in front of Crocodile. Yet Cealan had crushed him without suffering any real injury. It was terrifying. The title God of War suits him perfectly, Robin whispered as she looked at Cealan. If she followed him, could she survive? Robin felt a glimmer of hope, but quickly extinguished it. How could someone like her, shrouded in darkness, ask for protection from Cealan? Crocodile, defeated. Cobra stared at the gravely wounded Crocodile in disbelief. Could the pirate who had plagued Alabasta for 3 years, a nightmare he could never dispel, really have been defeated today? Cobra wiped his eyes, looked at Crocodile again and again, and finally confirmed it. It's over. It's finally over. Alabasta is saved. Cobra looked up at the sky, tears streaming down his face, his voice choked with emotion. 3 years of drought and chaos. Everything Cobra had endured, all the injustices and sorrow, came to an end at this very moment. The dark cloud that loomed over the nation had finally lifted. Haha, 300 million berries. Worth it. Completely worth it. But it's not enough. I need to do more. Cobra was so overjoyed he could barely think straight, frantically considering how to repay Cealan. He had cleared Cobra's name, saved both him and his daughter, and rescued the entire nation. Cealan had done too much. Cobra felt that 300 million berries wasn't enough to express his gratitude. He wanted all of Alabasta to sing Cealan's praises. He wanted to empty the national treasury and reward Cealan. He wanted to host a grand celebration in Cealan's honor. On the other side, Cealan, who was surrounded by 3 women, didn't feel great. Cealan, I'm so glad you're okay. Cealan, thank you for saving my country. Nami, Tashigi, and Vivi surrounded Cealan, chattering excitedly. Over the past few days, they had constantly worried about Cealan's battle with Crocodile. Though they had seen Cealan's strength before, they were still uncertain. Crocodile was a notorious pirate with worldwide recognition and acknowledged power. Cealan had just entered the Grand Line. His reputation was nowhere near Crocodile's. But now, with Crocodile lying defeated before them, they fully accepted the reality. Their captain Cealan was that powerful, that overwhelming. He had just entered the Grand Line, and already crushed Crocodile, one of the 7 warlords of the sea. Alright, let's stop talking for now. Crocodile is still lying here. I'll take him back first. Cealan said helplessly. 3 women, 1 dramatic situation. Old wisdom holds true. Right now, he felt this was more troublesome than fighting Crocodile. After hearing Cealan's words, the 3 women calmed down. Cealan let out a sigh of relief, picked up the severely wounded Crocodile, and began to leave. The soldiers thought Cealan was declaring victory and began to cheer again. God of war, God of war. All the soldiers shouted with fanatic devotion, escorting Cealan as he walked at the front. This was a hero who had saved the nation. He deserved the highest honor. Cealan, walking at the front, was not embarrassed. He felt a sense of pride welling up in his heart. Chapter 44 Borsalino. Amid the cheers of the crowd, Cealan prepared to take Crocodile away. Suddenly, he stopped and looked off into the distance. A golden flash shot down from the sky at high speed, landing right in front of him. A tall man, nearly 3 meters in height, appeared wearing a marine cloak of justice and a golden suit. Crocodile, who had been limp in Cealan's grasp, opened his eyes. "Admiral Kizaru of the Navy. You really value me, but it seems you're a bit late." Crocodile looked at Kizaru and gave a bitter smile. He had expected this after his plans were exposed, but what he hadn't expected was to be taken down by Cealan before the admiral even arrived. Crocodile couldn't help but glance at Cealan. This guy was almost on par with an admiral in strength. As one of the 7 warlords of the sea, it wasn't a loss to be caught between these two monsters. He mocked his own bitterness and consoled himself. Cealan observed Kizaru with interest. This was his first time seeing one of the top combatants in the world. Unfortunately, all he saw was a laid-back demeanor and that annoyingly smug face. Cobra and the surrounding officers also recognized Kizaru, but they had little respect for this belated justice. If they'd waited on him for rescue, they'd be under tombstones by now. Kizaru glanced at the defeated crocodile in Cealan's grasp and the cheering soldiers behind him, then fell silent. He had rushed over, but still arrived late. Fortunately, Cealan had defeated Crocodile and stopped the rebellion. Oh, scary, scary. Newcomers these days are really terrifying. Kizaru stepped onto the crystal basin beneath his feet and commented with amusement. This level of destruction far exceeded the damage caused by his Yasakani no Megatama. This Cealan kid was truly surprising. "You're here for Crocodile, Admiral," Cealan said casually. Now that Crocodile had lost his status as a warlord, he was fair game for a bounty. Thanks to a period of cooperation, Cealan and the Marines had built a foundation of basic trust. He had no interest in keeping the bounty for himself. "Haha, don't worry, young man. The bounty will be delivered from the nearby base," Kizaru replied with a grin. After that, Kizaru took Crocodile and left happily. Not bad at all. He thought it would be a hassle, but it turned out to be a simple pickup job. Marine Headquarters, Fleet Admiral's office. "You mean you didn't even make a move, and Cealan already took care of Crocodile?" Sengoku looked at Kizaru in disbelief. Crocodile was one of the 7 warlords of the sea and one of the trickiest Logia-type devil fruit users, especially in a desert terrain that favored his devil fruit. Very few in the entire headquarters could guarantee victory against him. Cealan had only just entered the Grand Line, so defeating a few of Crocodile's subordinates was already pushing it. This was outrageous. Yeah, and not only did he defeat Crocodile, he didn't even get injured. He's really as terrifying as a monster. Kizaru sighed, his tone exaggerated as usual, but the shock on his face was real. "If I remember correctly, he's only been in the Grand Line for about half a month, right? And he's already reached this level? That progress is insane." Sengoku rubbed his temples, feeling a headache coming on. Seeing Kizaru's expression, Sengoku could only accept that Cealan really did defeat Crocodile, but it was just too unbelievable. Even tabloid newspapers wouldn't dare to publish something so exaggerated. It had only been half a month since he left the East Blue, and the opponents he defeated jumped from small fry to a warlord. That kind of leap was absurd. Crocodile's strength was easily above that of a Marine Vice Admiral. Only admirals could be confident in defeating him. Yet Cealan defeated Crocodile without suffering a single wound. Did that mean Cealan's strength was already near Admiral level? It had only been 7 or 8 months since his debut in the East Blue, and now he had defeated a warlord. Good thing he's a bounty hunter. If he were a pirate, we'd be in real trouble. Vice Admiral Tsuru, who had been silent until now, finally spoke with a sigh of relief. In her opinion, Cealan's current strength placed him at the top end of the warlords, and his potential might even match that of the 4 emperors. If Cealan became a pirate, he would certainly become the youngest Yonko, and the Marines would face yet another unsolvable problem. Thankfully, Cealan accepted the Marine-issued bounty hunter license. For now, he was an ally. Now, we need to seriously consider how to deal with him moving forward. Sengoku placed his hands on the desk, his tone solemn. The Navy had paid attention to Cealan before, but that was back when he was in the East Blue. Now that he had defeated Crocodile, he needed much more attention. His current rank as a headquarters captain was far below what he deserved. It was even a little insulting. Raise his hunter's license level to Rear Admiral and give him Rear Admiral treatment. Sengoku thought it over briefly and made his decision. The Navy had no better way to draw Cealan in, so this was the best they could do to show their appreciation. "Alright, we'll proceed with that." Sengoku stroked his beard and sighed. He really couldn't think of a better option, so this would have to do for now. In his heart, Sengoku knew this still didn't match Cealan's value, but it was already the highest recognition they could offer at the moment. Sigh. Sengoku let out a long sigh. Why wouldn't Cealan join the Marines? If he were willing to enlist, Sengoku wouldn't mind personally persuading the 5 elders to name him an admiral candidate. In Sengoku's eyes, Cealan was destined to become a 4 emperors level powerhouse. If only Cealan would join the Marines, he could lead them into a brand new era. Chapter 45, Age of Bounty Hunters? At the World Economy News King Morgans was seated in his office. Shocking. A member of the 7 warlords of the sea attempted to seize a kingdom and was defeated by a rookie. "Boss, what do you think of this headline?" Editor-in-Chief Lawrence held a manuscript and asked Morgans. "Good. Use it exactly like that. Print 10 million copies. No, make it 100 million. Once printing is done, distribute immediately. In his Birdman form, Morgan smacked his beak excitedly and ordered the maximum print run. It was already sensational that a warlord tried to take over a kingdom, but even more explosive was the fact that the warlord was defeated by a newcomer. Morgans hadn't seen such breaking news in years, and he was certain this story would shock the world. 100 million newspapers, they'll definitely sell out. Morgans already envisioned the scene of the papers flying off the shelves. He was going to strike gold again. Yes, boss. Editor-in-Chief Lawrence responded with excitement and left the office. Ignoring Lawrence's departure, Morgans began pondering the central figure of the story. Cealan, that name sounds familiar. He stroked his chin, then remembered. Half a month ago, he had published a piece about Cealan slicing the flagship of the Krieg pirates in one strike, which had become big news in the East Blue. Back then, he thought Cealan might be promising but ignored him since it was just the East Blue. Who would have thought that only half a month later, Cealan would create such earth-shattering news? If I'd known, I would have kept a closer eye on him and gotten first-hand coverage. Morgans flapped his wings regretfully. He had been a step too late in this case and didn't capture the most dramatic footage, making the article slightly less impactful. If he had gotten a photo of Crocodile being defeated by Cealan, the headline would have been legendary. Looks like I'll need to keep a close eye on this rising star from now on. I can't afford to miss another scoop. As he spoke, Morgan circled Cealan's name in red. Cealan was strong, a bounty hunter, and clearly someone who would stir up the seas. As long as he kept tracking Cealan's movements, he was sure the headlines would keep rolling in. That day, countless newsbirds flew out of the World Economic News headquarters, delivering newspapers across the world. In the first half of the Grand Line, countless pirates stared at the newspaper in their hands, stunned. A rookie who just entered the Grand Line beat Crocodile. A young pirate shouted in disbelief. That was a member of the 7 Warlords of the Sea, a terrifying figure who kept countless pirates in check and possessed power and status every pirate dreamed of. And now, he had been defeated by someone unknown? It shattered their beliefs. Their fear of the warlords began to fade. Could Crocodile have just been all bark and no bite? The young pirate had never witnessed Crocodile's strength, so he could only speculate. Maybe Crocodile was the weakest warlord. He even had a missing hand. If Crocodile's just a show-off, then Cealan, who beat him, might be the same. The young pirate muttered, his eyes gradually lighting up with ambition. If he could defeat Cealan, wouldn't he become famous and rise to the same level as the warlords? He had to consider whether this was the chance of a lifetime. Damn it, let's go for it. He clenched his fists. He wouldn't let this opportunity slip by. He wanted fame. He wanted power. All around, old pirates snickered, watching the younger ones and preparing to enjoy the show. Crocodile isn't some weakling, and Cealan, the one who defeated him, is definitely a true powerhouse. The old pirates recalled Crocodile's past feats and couldn't help but show some respect, and they feared Cealan even more. A bounty hunter who defeated a warlord the moment he debuted? That was terrifying. They realized that another powerful figure had emerged on the sea, and all challengers would become his stepping stones. They looked at the young pirates who were getting restless, silently amused. As for giving warnings? Forget it. The pain they had endured when they were young wouldn't be spared to the next generation. Let these youngsters, who didn't understand the depth of the sea, experience its cruelty firsthand. And so, many young pirates, full of wild ambition, set off on their journey to challenge Cealan. On a nameless island in the Grand Line, the red-haired pirates were drinking heavily with Dracul Mihawk. Red-haired Shanks held a newspaper in his hand, reading it intently. Mihawk, looks like another rising star has appeared on the seas, Shanks said with emotion as he read the article. He'd just entered the Grand Line and already defeated Crocodile. That was some sharp momentum. You might be interested in him. Shanks glanced at the giant sword Cealan wielded in the photo and said to Mihawk, "Oh, really?" Mihawk took the paper and casually glanced at it. Newcomers emerged all the time. So far, only 2 had caught his eye: Cealan, who wielded a sword, and Zoro, whose will was strong. But both had only just begun their journeys and were still too green. However, when Mihawk saw Cealan's portrait, his expression turned serious. He managed to defeat Crocodile? He's growing fast. Mihawk narrowed his eyes, staring at Cealan's image. Cealan's strength had genuinely piqued his interest. You've seen him before. Shanks looked curious. It had been a long time since he'd seen Mihawk this serious. Yes, I have. Half a month ago, I sensed sword intent lingering in the East Blue. It was the aura of a true swordsman. If he could defeat Crocodile, then he's earned the right to fight me. Mihawk stroked the blade of Yoru as he spoke seriously. Cealan's emergence had stirred his fighting spirit. A rare occurrence. Suddenly, Mihawk smirked at Shanks. When Cealan defeated the Krieg pirates, your straw hat Luffy was still scrubbing dishes. Maybe Cealan is the true protagonist of this era, Mihawk said teasingly. Shanks had bet his left arm on Luffy, believing him to be the chosen one of this age. But Mihawk was now ready to bet that Cealan was the real protagonist. Ha ha ha, we'll see. Shanks laughed heartily, as if unfazed by his friend's jab. But deep down, he felt uneasy. There had been no word from Luffy since he set sail. Meanwhile, Cealan had appeared out of nowhere and was already making waves. Could it be that this wasn't the age of pirates anymore, but the age of bounty hunters led by Cealan? The best light novels are waiting for you here. Don't miss out, subscribe on Infinite Novel now.